Hi, welcome back. Simon Hobbs from FreeSource here. In the previous videos, I'd set up Lendo and DDEV local development, and I've just added a README just to describe that because our project's starting to get a little bit complex. And in this video, I was thinking that it's all well and good to use these cool local development environments, but some teams do prefer to do native Docker Compose, and I think there's a perception that that's very technical or very ops, and it doesn't necessarily have to be. And so in this video, I want to do a really simple Docker Compose setup by using some best practice examples that exist out there, so that you can compare the basic setup. The solution I'm going to use for this setup is I'm going to base the solution on this Docker for Drupal setup. So Docker for Drupal is designed to be a native Docker Compose setup that you can use. I'm not going to use a lot of this stuff. I'm just going to use the Docker Compose file. The Docker Compose file is a configuration for the Docker Compose tool, and the Docker Compose tool will be installed if you have Docker installed. So the prerequisites for what I'm doing here are essentially just Docker, plus your application with Composer running Drupal. So I'm going to just get started. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to copy this whole configuration here out of the Docker Compose file. Wodbee Docker for Drupal has been around for a long time. So we can trust that they've solved a lot of problems for us. So we're just going to copy what they do. So let's create a file called Docker Compose, which has all our configuration in it. So what I'm doing is I'm just going to remove all of the comments first. I don't need cron jobs for this example. I don't need all of these other tools like Postgre, Apache, web server. I don't need PHPMyAdmin, and so forth. So just come down, and what I do need is I want it to handle this networking for me. So I'll leave that in and remove that. I don't want Mailhog as well, sorry. And then I want to replace all of these variables with real values, with static values. And I wouldn't do that normally, but for this example, I just want to do hard-coded values. So where these variables come from, in this situation, is from the env file in the local env file. So these get pumped into that file from Docker Compose. So what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to replace all these values. And I will do this all in one copy and paste, but I'll just talk through it. So the version of MariaDB, all of these project names will just be Drupal CAS. The version of the web server, the version of, the name of the project again, the URL for the project. We're going to run off port 80 here, and we're going to add a few alternate environment variables. So let me just do that copy and paste now. Okay, so you can see a couple of these environment variables that I've changed. I've set the Drush domain name so that Drush commands know what the domain is, and I've set this special variable called free as in source, which is true, and I'm going to use this variable to determine if I'm in my local development environment. And there's not much else to say about the rest of it. So you can see here I've set port 80 just statically. But otherwise, other than just setting these versions, hard-coding these versions, this is basically that Docker for Drupal setup. So the next thing I want to do is go and in my settings PHP. So at the moment I'm checking is Lando enabled or is DDEV enabled, and then I want to add to that or is this variable called free as in source set to true. So if that's set to true, then it's going to load this local settings file. And in this local settings file, I'm going to just load different database credentials. So I've got a new option here, 3. So native Docker Compose users. So if free as in source is true, then these are all going to say Drupal based on my Docker Compose YAML configuration. And my host is, I believe, going to come from this value, MariaDB. Okay, and so that's our settings there. Okay, now I'm going to run some commands locally. So docker compose is the command up, and I'm just adding this build just to make sure I'm rebuilding it locally since I've been mucking around a lot. Okay, that's what we want. Come over here to another command prompt, and I'll do docker. So to run commands inside the container without using any sort of aliases or anything, I want to go. It's docker compose. Oops, docker compose, and the subcommand is exec, and I have to run inside. I have to choose one of my containers to run inside. So I'm running it inside this PHP container. So docker compose exec inside the PHP container, and then I'm going to run bash, and it'll give me a prompt. Once I've got my prompt here, you can see if I have a look at all of the environment variables, you can see things like my free as in source variable there. And then here again, without overly customizing my environment, I'll go into the web directory. Drush has the best chance of knowing where the Drupal site is because I'll be inside the web root of the Drupal site. And I've got my Drush available on Composer, so vendor bin Drush, and I should be able to run a status. And you can see there that running status gives me the database user names and so forth that I've set in settings.php. Then I can run site install minimal. Thank you. And finally, I can log into the site. And because I have that environment variable there for Drush, it knows what the URL is. So then I can copy and paste this URL, go over to my browser, wherever my browser is, new window, paste that in. And there's my site. So that's all for this video. Just wanted to keep it short and sharp, and appreciate you watching. Thank you.